of quiet despair. Paintbrushes lie scattered across the floor, their bristles stiff with dried pigment. Half-finished canvases, once vibrant with hopeful strokes, lean against the walls, now faded and forgotten. Evelyn sits curled up on a threadbare couch, her fingers nervously tracing the frayed edges of a sketchbook. This was not always her life. Once she was a bright-eyed artist, her imagination filled with color and possibility. But over time, life's injustices began to pile on her shoulders. Her talent was dismissed as frivolous, her work deemed unworthy by critics who barely glanced at it. Flashbacks show a younger Evelyn holding up a painting with pride, only for a gallery owner to scoff. Come back when you have something worth showing. Her personal life fared no better. A montage reveals scenes of betrayal, a close friend stealing her ideas, a romantic partner who left her when she needed them most, and her family offering nothing but hollow platitudes. Her voiceover whispers, "I gave the world everything I had. It only ever took more." The final blow comes when Victor Crane, a towering figure in the art world, publicly humiliates her at an exhibition. "A fraud," he sneers. The audience sees her crumble in silence, tears streaming down her face as laughter echoes around her. As the rain outside intensifies, Evelyn's inner monologue sharpens. "I tried to be good, to endure, but no one survives by being kind." The stage is set. This is not just a story of revenge. It is the story of what happens when the world pushes someone too far. It wasn't one event that broke Evelyn. It was the culmination of many wounds, each cutting deeper than the last. But the betrayal that pushed her beyond the point of no return came from the man who held her future in his hands. Victor Crane. Victor was a titan of the art world, known for shaping careers and crushing dreams. For Evelyn, he represented a sliver of hope. She submitted her portfolio to his gallery, pouring her heart into every piece. To her surprise, Victor expressed interest, inviting her to a private meeting. For the first time, she felt seen. The night of the gallery unveiling, however, turned into her nightmare. Victor unveiled her work, but not as a triumph. He framed her paintings as parodies of real art, mocking their raw emotion and unpolished edges. The audience laughed, encouraged by Victor's cruel words. Evelyn stood frozen, humiliation washing over her like a tidal wave. Later, she discovered Victor had stolen elements of her work, incorporating them into his own exhibits, while labeling her a talentless amateur. It wasn't just theft. It was a public execution of her identity. In that moment, something within Evelyn shattered. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was anger, simmering and dark, waiting to explode. Evelyn sat alone in the corner of her apartment, the laughter from Victor's gallery still echoing in her mind. Her paintings, once a source of pride, now felt like a mockery. She stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror, her eyes bloodshot and hollow. "Why should I apologize for the monster I've become?" she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. Did they ever apologize for what they did to me? Her thoughts spiraled as she replayed the moments that brought her to this breaking point. The stolen dreams, the relentless rejections, the mocking voices. Every memory was like a shard of glass cutting into her soul. She had tried to be patient, to believe in fairness, but the world had only rewarded her kindness with cruelty. Evelyn clutched her sketchbook, flipping through pages of discarded ideas and forgotten ambitions. "They took everything from me," she murmured, "and still they expect me to stay silent, to bow down, to beg for forgiveness I don't owe." This was no longer about the art. It was about reclaiming her identity, her voice. The pain she felt was no longer a weight. It was fuel. Her transformation had already begun, and there was no turning back. On a cold, restless night, Evelyn made a decision that changed everything. She stood in the center of her apartment, surrounded by the remnants of her past. Torn canvases, shattered glass, and discarded dreams. This wasn't a graveyard. It was a forge. They will never see me as weak again, she said aloud, her voice steady for the first time in weeks. Her reflection in the cracked mirror seemed sharper, more defined, as if it too was shedding its fragility. Evelyn began to reassemble herself piece by piece. She devoured books on art history and psychology, learning how power is wielded in the creative world. She studied the mechanics of influence, mastering how to manipulate perception. Late into the night, she sketched relentlessly, crafting darker, bolder pieces that reflected her newfound strength. Her vulnerability became her armor. She reached out to those Victor had wronged, forming alliances with people who had suffered under his dominance. Slowly, she built a network of voices determined to expose the cracks in his empire. Evelyn's pain no longer held her captive. It became her weapon, sharp and unrelenting. For the first time, she was not just surviving, she was preparing to rise. And the world that had dismissed her would soon take notice. Evelyn's transformation was not sudden. It was deliberate, a slow evolution fueled by her unyielding resolve. Each step she took was calculated, each action purposeful. The timid artist she once was faded into a distant memory, replaced by someone unrecognizable, even to herself. Her art became a reflection of her inner metamorphosis. Gone were the soft colors and hopeful themes of her past. Instead, her canvases now pulsed with raw emotion, jagged strokes of crimson and black, layered textures that seemed to vibrate with anger and defiance. Critics who once dismissed her began whispering about the shocking power of her new work. But it wasn't just her art that changed. Evelyn herself was a force transformed. She trained her body and mind, shedding the frailty that had once defined her. She learned to command a room with a glance, her quiet presence now laced with an undeniable edge. Her newfound strength attracted attention. Those who had once underestimated her began to notice her. But by then, it was too late. Evelyn was no longer seeking approval. She was seizing control. What began as survival had become something far greater. Evelyn was no longer the victim of her story. She was rewriting it, one bold stroke at a time. Victor Crane was a man who thrived on control. With his tailored suits, sharp words, and impeccable charm, he ruled the art world as its self-proclaimed kingmaker. Critics hung on his every word, and aspiring artists groveled at his feet, desperate for a shred of his approval. To the public, Victor was a paragon of sophistication, a connoisseur who discovered raw talent and transformed it into brilliance. But behind closed doors, he was ruthless, exploiting artists' vulnerabilities to enrich himself. To him, people like Evelyn were tools, useful only as long as they fed his empire. In flashbacks, Victor is seen towering over Evelyn, his dismissive gaze cutting through her like a blade. His booming laughter fills the gallery as he mocks her work, his words dripping with cruelty. "You think this is art?" he scoffed, holding one of her paintings up for the crowd to ridicule. "It's amateur hour at best." But Victor's arrogance was his greatest weakness. He believed himself untouchable, secure in his power and influence. Evelyn had been a mere shadow in his world, insignificant, easy to crush. He had underestimated her completely. Now, as Evelyn's strength grew, she prepared to face him not as a victim, but as a force he could no longer ignore. Evelyn knew she couldn't hide in the shadows any longer. Her transformation was incomplete without action, without making the world see the strength forged by her pain. Her target was clear. Victor Crane, the man who had mocked her, stolen from her, and left her broken in the eyes of the art world. But vengeance wasn't just personal. It was justice. Evelyn's journey wasn't just about reclaiming her identity. It was about exposing the cracks in the facade of power that people like Victor wielded. She set her sights on his empire, determined to dismantle it piece by piece. The first strike came quietly. Evelyn began planting seeds of doubt in the art world, anonymously leaking evidence of Victor's underhanded dealings. Artists he had exploited came forward, emboldened by her whispers of rebellion. Bit by bit, Victor's iron grip on the industry began to loosen. Evelyn's momentum grew as she orchestrated her next moves, each one striking at the heart of Victor's legacy. With every step, she solidified her resolve. This was her time to rise, to prove that those the world tried to break could rebuild themselves stronger than before. Subscribe to Fearless Mindset for more powerful stories of transformation and vengeance. Together we'll uncover what it means to rise stronger, fight back, and embrace the fearless mindset.